Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here. Welcome back, everybody, for more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. I really shouldn't do this video when I'm pressed for time, and I am pressed for time because we're starting our protest early today in downtown Clearwater. But I'm going to do this anyway, and I'll try to keep the additional chatter to a minimum. I'll try not to stop the video every 5 seconds. Patrick Bet-David interviewed cult expert Rick Ross yesterday, or he published it to his channel yesterday. I was really glad to see Rick Ross interviewed. I've done an interview with Rick Ross on this channel. He is a cult expert. I've read his book. He's very fun to talk to. He's very informed. He's excellent at communicating the fundamental principles that he wants to get out there. And I was very curious to see what happened in this interview, because Patrick Bet-David has had a habit of many, many times on his podcast of being very strangely apologetic and defensive of Scientology, even though he has also interviewed people like Mike Rinder, for example. I think when his podcast was an earlier version of it, I think I remember he interviewed Mark Headley. I feel like he's interviewed another ex-Scientologist, but I cannot recall who. Whenever he's interviewing an ex-Scientologist, he seems to be very agreeable and, with the subject matter being what's being discussed. He seems to be very informed and condemnatory of Scientology abuse. And yet when he's not sitting in front of an ex-Scientologist, he's talking about how wonderful Scientology is and how hardworking they all are and how good they are at making money and how successful Tom Cruise is and how wonderful Tom Cruise looks and Grant Cardone. And if Scientology were really so bad, then all of these things wouldn't be true. Or if these things, these Scientologists are so hardworking and affluent and successful, so how bad could Scientology really be? One of the things you have to understand about Patrick Bet-David is that he's someone who made his money founding and building a multi-level marketing firm, which means Patrick Bet-David is someone who has profited and succeeded by selling people a fraudulent business opportunity. Patrick Bet-David and the multi-level marketing world is extremely culty to begin with and prioritizes money and profits over relationships and honesty. Multi-level marketing is a predatory business model. You really are selling a statistically impossible business opportunity to everyone in your life who's closest to you. I mean, that's the word I'll use is unethical. Multi-level marketing happens to be very popular within Scientology, and it happens to be very popular within a lot of tight-knit religious type groups. So I very much chuckled to myself when at one point in this interview, Rick Ross mentioned that Keith Raniere had never had a real job in his life and had created a multi-level marketing company. Patrick Bet-David never is like, wait a second, what's wrong with multi-level marketing? I created a multi-level marketing company. That's where I made all my money. Okay, we're going to go through some of the clips of this interview. I've got them all time-stamped here. I'm pressed for time, but we're going to do this, guys. The first clip, I've cut out the intro because the intro is too long. Patrick is basically asking a question of kind of like, well, when does something that might just seem like a great motivational life coach type deal, when does that cross the line to becoming an actual cult or a destructive cult? And I just wanted you to see what Rick Ross has to say about this. So here we go.
That tipping point is when you become so socially isolated within the group. Unlike a motivational speaker, you go to their seminar, you leave, you rejoin the world, you take with you whatever principles they may have taught you. And to some extent, some of the themes used by cults can be seen in other areas in the world. And that's part of the facade of destructive cults, is that they are going to project a positive image. They're going to put forth a kind of mask that doesn't let you see what is behind the door, what the more dark demands might be of the group. So unlike a seminar, let's take Nexium. Nexium was a seminar selling company that did self-help, motivational kind of seminars. People would go off, they'd do a 13, 14-day intensive. They would be assigned a coach. They would go through a training process that was dictated by a manual. And behind all of this was Keith Raniere, who they called Vanguard. what the difference is
It's from Nexium.
Yeah, this is the leader of Nexium, which really was congregating around Albany, New York. And Raniere would eventually be arrested, tried for sex trafficking, fraud, various things. And now,
Okay, the clip went longer. See, I for my timestamps, I've put where I wanted the clip to start, but I was in a rush, so I didn't put where I wanted the clip to end. For this clip, we're not going to get into the thing about Nexium. It was just that one part about, you know, what these cults will do is they'll put basically their shiny front forward, the parts that where you know, the information being espoused by the cult leader or in the cult is stuff that seems to be relevant or helpful in the real world. And in Scientology, you see that in their things like the Way to Happiness front group that they have, or the Youth for Human Rights, or United for Human Rights, or Youth for a Drug-Free World, or and here in Clearwater, it's even the part of them running around and helping board up windows of non-Scientologist businesses for hurricanes. You're like, well, that seems like a nice thing to do. And you're like, well, it does seem like a nice thing to do. But they only do it once they've put on bright yellow t-shirts and have camera crews following them around so that they can put out a press release saying, look how much good we do. They're not doing it because it's actually what Scientologists believe should be done. They're doing it just to create good PR for the organization itself. Okay, let's jump forward to the 19-minute mark where he talks about working with some of the victims of Nexium, and then he gets into how Nexium was actually a ripoff of Scientology. This is good stuff. Here we go.
interesting story. Basically, I deprogrammed people that were involved in Nexium, 4 families. I worked with victims, and I facilitated reports being written by a clinical psychologist and a forensic psychiatrist analyzing the seminar training that Keith Raniere used, which, by the way, he ripped off Scientology. He was really a plagiarist because many of the things that he taught were lifted directly from Scientology. For example, calling people that were critical of Nexium suppressive people or suppressive persons.
SPs.
SPs, urging people to disconnect from SPs. This was right out of Scientology. So Raniere, what he did was he put together something that took a little bit from Landmark Education and seminar structure.
That was from 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yes.
Landmark and PSI, and there was a couple programs like that back in the days.
Well,
and they would call you at the end crying, I'm so sorry what I did to you. And I'm like,
all right. So Patrick derails this part of the conversation a little bit by pretending like Nexium is a Landmark is just something that existed 40 years ago. It's so ridiculous. Landmark is still operating today. I've interviewed people from Landmark on my channel who just very, very, very recently had left Landmark, were high up individuals in Landmark. I forgot to mention Patrick Bet-David and his business in the multi-level marketing industry. This is where he encountered Scientology and Scientologists, because he had interactions with a multi-level marketing company that's very much enmeshed with Scientology called World Financial Group. And there is a Scientologist who's a very high up in the MLM company of World Financial Group named Michael Coleman. And a lot of second-gen Scientologists of my age or 10 years older than me know Michael Coleman. And Michael got into World Financial Group, and he recruited a hell of a lot of Scientologists and ex-Sea Org members into that MLM group. There was a local Clearwater chapter of that group that I actually had signed up with when I was between jobs at one point. And it was being run by Malia Schneider, a Scientologist, and her ex-Sea Org husband, boyfriend at the time, who I cannot remember his name, but he's one of the guys I used to be in the Sea Org with. And I actually went out and I got my life, health, and annuities license. And I did the course and I got licensed. And then right after I got licensed, I actually got another job. That was the job I really wanted. So I never ended up actually doing any work for World Financial Group. But Patrick is he's going to mention this without mentioning World Financial Group and without mentioning Michael Coleman. He's actually going to allude to this later. But Patrick's really got a way of interjecting and derailing a conversation when he doesn't necessarily love the way that it's going. Okay, let's jump forward to the 31-minute mark, and let's see where Rick Ross, without knowing that Patrick Bet-David made all his money in the MLM world, says Keith Raniere never had a real job. He started an MLM company. All right.
Is what's good for me is right, and what's wrong is what's bad for me. So do what I tell you and cooperate with me to give me what I want, and you're good, and we're good. But otherwise, it's bad. And so that's how Keith Raniere was. Was he obsessed with video games? Whatever. I mean, what came out in his deposition was he never really had a real job. He was either a student or he was running an MLM. He was always taking advantage of people.
What MLMs was he in? Who was Amway? What else was he?
He was an Amway distributor, is my understanding, and then he created his own MLM called Consumer Byline, and it was a scam, and that's why it went under. And then he created Nexium with Nancy Salzman, his second in command, and Salzman was a nurse.
Okay, good. So then they get into talking about all that, and Nexium itself was in some ways an MLM. It was very MLM-y. Some people say that Scientology is kind of MLM-y because of its commission structure, where if you get someone into Scientology and you continue to stay in touch with that person and you encourage them to keep doing more Scientology courses and paying Scientology more money, you will get a commission for the rest of your life, really, a certain percentage commission on every dollar that person donates to Scientology. And that sounds like MLM, except in Scientology, the commission structure and the incentive structure only goes one level deep. So if I get you into Scientology, I get a commission off of you. But if you get someone else into Scientology, I don't get any commission off of that someone else. Okay, let's jump forward to 3250. And my note here says, Patrick says that something is similar to Scientology. All right, so let's see what's going on here.
Me, and I saw this file when I testified in the criminal trial.
Oh, so he's talking about, I'll intro this for you. Keith Raniere, the head of Nexium, actually sued Rick Ross at some point. And there were depositions and everything. So like Rick Ross has actually met Keith Raniere and talked to Keith Raniere and been across the table from him. And he's telling some stories about this. And he's talking about how they basically have, blackmail files, like dirt files on all of their people. And so does Scientology. And it seemed like Scientology might have even shared their Rick Ross blackmail folder with Nexium. It's something like this. I'm just giving you the broad strokes of what's being discussed. And then we get to
in a federal lawsuit. And also they would find files in her basement of the perceived enemies of Nexium, including me. And I saw this file when I testified in the criminal trial of Keith Raniere. They showed it to me. Did you know they had a file on you? And
you.
Yeah, and they showed
this
me.
is very similar to Scientology. So far, what you were saying. Every time I've interviewed somebody that said something bad about Scientology, I've gotten an email and a website about why that person's wrong and history of that person's wrongdoing over their lifetime, whatever it is.
That's their dead agent file. That's what it's called.
For Scientology?
In Scientology, if they put together a file on a perceived enemy, it's called your dead agent file. I think mine is hundreds of pages long. It's been thrown around.
So you're famous in Scientology.
Well, I'm certainly considered an SP. I've been labeled an SP for decades. Yeah, and
boy, you're a troublemaker. It's to them. That's not.
And their lead counsel, Kendrick Moxon, and I have crossed swords in court. So I think, Scientology is an example of a group that goes after its enemies. Keith Raniere, I think, learned from that example.
Did they ever meet? Does he have any? As I just typed right in, if there's any affiliation, there's nothing connected between the two.
I have been told that one of the inner circle in Nexium was a former Scientologist. And I was also told that at one time when Keith Raniere was suing me, he exchanged ideas or thoughts.
Okay, good. I know it sounds like they're about to talk about something terribly interesting, but it doesn't actually end up being terribly interesting. I have heard that Keith Raniere had at one point maybe done some services at a Scientology mission, but all of this stuff is hearsay, and I don't want to represent that as a fact. But I'll tell you, as an ex-Scientologist, when I was watching the Nexium documentaries, I was like, no. It's not possible that this guy didn't know personally have some experience with Scientology. You don't take the words and the concepts and the phrases by accident. Anyway, it was unbelievable as an ex-Scientologist watching those documentaries. Okay, let's jump to the 37 mark where Patrick Bet David can't help himself. He starts talking about how wonderful Scientology really is. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but let's see what he says here.
I've worked with Scientologists, and I will tell you from my experience, I've never had a bad experience with Scientologists. They work very hard. I recruited people from the C organization. They would work 16-hour days. They were not my agents. We shared an office together selling insurance. So they ran their own agency. I ran my own agency, but we were overlapping each other, and I would help them grow their business because one of the guys, became a friend. And when we're at the office late at night, midnight, 11 o'clock, I'm finishing up my day. And I would say, well, do you know what a cyst is? We do something called a cyst. We do something. And I went to the facility. I got some of the books. I read some of the material, Dianetics and other things. I probably have a couple of Dianetics copies in my office. And you see some things that are interesting. Then you read about the founder. Then things get a little bit suspicious. And like, wait a minute, and then you read Leah Remini and watch the stuff she did, or Presley. Is it Leslie Presley, if I'm saying it correctly? One of the Presleys, right? Who was the one that was
Priscilla Presley?
It's the long lost sister, Leslie Presley.
Priscilla Presley
joined, and she brought in Lisa Marie Presley, her daughter.
That's right. So what patterns do you notice with Scientology like this? However, they've never gotten in trouble. Not they've never gotten in trouble. They're still around. They're still there. They still have their religion exemption. They still have the tax benefits. What patterns do you notice there?
I know that sounds like a super interesting question, but it's not. Rick Ross does an amazing job answering questions. So he figures out how to give good answers to this question. It's not a very honest question. And that tends to be Patrick Bet-David's sort of kind of his approach to all this stuff. Like, well, they never did anything bad to me, so what's the big deal? The people seem to be good people, so how bad can it be? They still exist, so they must not be doing anything wrong. Like, it's just a very kind of intellectually dishonest approach that he takes, not just to Scientology, but to a whole lot of things. And I've watched so much of this content that it's just like, if someone can make money, Patrick Bet-David is pretty much like, if somebody can make money, if something can help you make money, how bad can it really be? And it's like, you know what, dude? He even said that they never really got into any trouble. It's like 11 of the highest level Scientologists were sent to prison, including the founder's wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, for orchestrating the largest ever infiltration of the United States government at the time. The espionage, the spying, the infiltration, the stealing of files, the framing of people. I mean, could you imagine if 11 high-level Scientology executives went to prison today? We would all think that it was the end of Scientology. And actually, I've been talking to some people about this recently. I think a lot of people tend to think of, oh, God, nothing matters until the government steps in. Or once the government steps in, that will be the end of it. And it's like, let's not forget, the government did step in between 1977 and 1980. 11 people went to prison. And yes, it had an effect on Scientology, but it didn't make them go away. And I'm saying this, I think there's an inspirational lesson to be taken from that. We don't need the government to step in to continue to help Scientology get closer and closer to its final day, its final member, its final dollar. Everything that we do here on the internet and in the real world to keep people from getting into Scientology and to help people who are leaving Scientology and to expose Scientology fraud and abuse, everything we do is bringing down Scientology. And when the government finally steps in to prosecute, that will be one more victory. But as far as I'm concerned, every single day we do what we do here on the internet, and every single day is a little victory. Okay, let's jump forward to 4820, and let's get into Shelly Miscavige. And I was very interested to see how this part of the conversation went down. Okay, 4820. Come on, you can do it. All right, let's do it this way.
That let everything else in, and then he left Scientology.
Yeah, the last time he did an interview, Miscavige, was with Ted Koppel. And I believe it's in 94 or something like that.
Yeah.
Could be. Rob, can you see what year that was, the Koppel interview? It's a long time interview, and people have had a hard time finding his wife. They don't know where his wife is.
She's been located. She is in relatively comfortable setting.
Good shape?
In Northern California. I think somewhat near.
She was missing for 20 years though, 15 years though.
Not really. I think there was a point where people will question, where is she? But eventually it would be established that she had been assigned to a Scientology branch in California, and that's where she works and she lives. And it's relatively secluded, and she is somewhat isolated. And you could even go so far as to say, well, David Miscavige did the equivalent of, woman, get thee to a nunnery.
Well, I mean, it says since her disappearance in 2007, she has been the subject of
Patrick is so pissed that Rick is contradicting him on this. He's not even interested in what Rick has to say.
Speculation and inquiries with her whereabouts. In 2012, attorneys who said they represented her responded by saying she was leading a private life devoted to the Church of Scientology. In 2013, Leah Remini, a former Scientologist and critic of the organization, filed a missing person reporting Miscavige with the LA department. The LAPD closed the investigation within hours and described the report as unfounded. Has she showed herself? Have people seen her?
Yes.
She has?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And where has that been documented?
I think she was seen at a restaurant eating out outside of
That's great news.
outside of the compound. She also has the compound that she's in is in Northern California. It's relatively secluded. It's actually quite nice from what I've heard. So she is basically comfortably living, devoted to Scientology in seclusion. And you could argue that David Miscavige wanted to get rid of her, that he put her there to take her out of the limelight, that he didn't want to share the limelight with her, and that he wanted her out of his life. Be that as it may, she's not unaccounted for. She lives in this relatively comfortable place in Northern California, albeit a full-time Scientology facility where she's working for Scientology day in, day out, and this is her life.
Rob?
This is the only Scientology in Northern California.
Yeah. And so even Patrick's producer can't even successfully bring up the right Scientology base. It's really annoying. Patrick's not even interested in the information. Rick's sources are the same sources as my sources. I have mentioned in the last many months about Shelly Miscavige being seen many times in many places. People on the internet want to be like, where's your evidence? My evidence is my evidence, and it will not be released until I choose to release it at the right time. Okay, let's jump forward to 5250, where Patrick again wants to talk about because Tom Cruise looks so good and has so much energy and has a good career, how bad could Scientology really be? Let's see.
Watch that to see what she says about her being
out.
Side. Tom Cruise is how old, Rob? Can you look up how Tom Cruise is? Tom Cruise is
63.
63 years old.
Yeah.
Go to Grant Cardone. Okay, Grant Cardone's age. He's probably got to be late 50s, early 60s. 67 years old. Can you go to images of Grant Cardone? He does not look 67 years old.
Grant Cardone doesn't look 67 years old. He takes an unbelievable amount of steroids. His identical twin brother, Gary, does look 67 years old because he does not take steroids. But really, Scientology is the reason Grant Cardone looks.
Okay, that's an older picture, but a recent one. The guy doesn't look 67 years old. It's probably a 2 year.
Well, that's also not a modern photo.
Picture, 1 year picture, something like that. So somebody may say, why do these two guys, why do they look so good in their 60s? Maybe they have figured something out.
Guys, Tom Cruise looks like, I don't want to say it. Look at an actual current photo of Tom Cruise. That's not a glamour shot on a website or in a magazine. Tom Cruise not looking that hot these days, guys.
That others haven't. What would you say to that?
I think that they live very healthy, productive lives.
Okay.
And I think that what we should disabuse ourselves of is the notion that intelligent, successful people cannot get caught up in cults. I have personally deprogrammed 5 medical doctors. One was an orthopedic surgeon, another was an anesthesiologist, very respected physicians. And each one of them, at the time that I worked with them, and each intervention thankfully was successful, they truly believed in the group that they were in. And only through an intervention were they brought out when their family supported that intervention. So it is possible for someone very intelligent, very successful in life to be caught up in a group that has been called a cult. In the case of Tom Cruise, he became involved in Scientology through his first wife.
Oh, this is such a good answer. His answer goes on for a while, and I'm like really looking at the clock here, but this is such a good answer. I want to let it roll.
Mimi Rogers, who had been herself raised in Scientology. After her parents left, I think Mimi Rogers probably wanted to continue to have a life with her parents. And she feared the process of disconnection, I believe. And so she ended up leaving Scientology. And Tom Cruise, ironically, who had been introduced to Scientology by Mimi Rogers, he divorced her. And I think it's fair to say that the reason, or at least it's been reported, that the reason behind each of his 3 divorces has been Scientology. Mimi Rogers left. Nicole Kidman wouldn't go all in. Katie Holmes wanted to protect her child from Scientology. Tom Cruise's only biological child, Suri Cruise. So what has happened with Tom Cruise is an interesting thing. Here's this man who is a very accomplished person, very successful, arguably brilliant when it comes to producing movies, understanding, what are the vehicles that he wants to back. People often call him the last big movie star in the world. But if you look at his personal life, how has Scientology affected that? He doesn't seem to have a relationship with his daughter, Suri. His 2 adopted children with Nicole Kidman are involved in Scientology, but they have largely been separated from Nicole Kidman, who is very careful what she says about Scientology in order to preserve her relationship with her 2 adopted children.
Yeah.
So even though you can look at Tom Cruise and say, what an incredible guy, incredibly successful, but Scientology has had an effect on him, and the effect has been 3 failed marriages. And that must be very painful for Tom Cruise. Also, the recent relationship with the actress Ana de Armas apparently ended when he wanted her to become involved in Scientology. That's been reported. So to the extent that Scientology can be a negative influence in your personal life and cause divorces, family estrangements, that's a problem that even the celebrities in Scientology deal with.
Wow, what a good answer. What a good answer. God, I love Rick Ross. He's such a good communicator. And in the cult space, the ex-cult space, you can have all the best information in the world, but if you're not an amazing communicator, it's only going to reach so far. And Rick Ross really knocks it out of the park. There's even more annoying parts of this interview where Patrick is trying to say that Scientology security checks, the interrogations, are really just like Catholic confession. Oh. And Rick does a really good job responding appropriately. I don't have time to play that clip. I got to get out of here. But let's look at some of the starred comments, and then we will wrap this up, folks. Old Frizzle. I saw this PBD podcast. I never liked Bet David, but he's so aggressive here and totally defends Scientology because he's met some Scientologists, and they seemed nice. Mike Rinder was on before. He knows. That's right. He does know. From a poet. It sounds to me like dude is talking about out both sides of his mouth. Yes. Patrick Bet David does talk out both sides of his mouth. Catherine Burt, we should start our own MLM with Scientology protests and pizza. Sign me up. PBD is a grifter, so this makes sense. K Fick, good to see you. Hey, Aaron, love the black shirt. Is that new? When I went out last night with the boys, we went out to one of my favorite spots. And at one point I walked outside and then I came back inside. And another guy who was there with some of his friends got up. He's like, excuse me. Can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah. He goes, are you Aaron? And I said, yes. And as you can see, I wear the black shirt in real life as well. Adam Carmona, hucksters defend Scientology as a professional courtesy. Constance, wow, Keith ripped off from Scientology. Hubbard ripped off from other people. Cincy Born, PBD might be trying to get in on some of that $50 a week employees. Yes, exactly. Irish Mania, PBD is an airhead who made all his money exploiting poor people to join MLMs. Itchy Thetans, I explained to my son the difference between tax-exempt organizations that give back and those taking advantage of the tax exemption. His take, they should have to show charitable acts like non-religious 501c3s. Yes. And that is also why Scientology will put on events for free for other local nonprofits, like many of the veterans organizations or the local NAACP chapter that runs around pushing Scientology's agenda at city council meetings. One of the ways, so Scientology will basically tell these nonprofits, you can hold an event in our Crystal Ballroom on the 10th floor of the Fort Harrison Hotel for free, and we will cater it for free, and we will staff it for free. And so that is Scientology legitimately using their money to help other nonprofits that in their own right legitimately give back to society in various ways. And that's one of the reasons they do it, is just to check that box. See, we are actually doing something good. All righty. Jeffrey Augustine says Hubbard never had a downline. He had slaves. Jabril Yusuf. AKA they were susceptible to manipulation and abuse, but it was for my benefit, so it was okay. Old Frizzle, and he seemed almost annoyed when Rick said that Shelly was fine, not what he wanted to hear. It was weird. Abigail says, FYI, I cannot stay for the whole protest stream tonight. So in case it's late, 3 Little Caesars pizzas and donuts are scheduled to arrive at Target 2 at 4:30. Tom Cruise is the landmark. That's amazing, Abigail. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Christy will also be sending Taco Bell. So it's going to be a smorgasbord over there at Target 2. Let's see. Hopefully we're going to get a bunch of new faces out there tonight. Constance says, and they still got their tax exempt status back even after the government stepped in. Excellent point. That's right. Night Sky Fire says, without Abigail, Jamie would starve. Yes, he would starve. He would absolutely starve. Olga Alice. PBD doesn't get it. He's very superficial, which means he's probably not very ethical and would look the other way if it means they made money, especially if they made it for him. The bipolar astrophotographer, Rick, drops the mic with a gentle, subtle, crazy, effective boom. All right, guys, there we go. I'm a little late. I got Francisco's giant, like 20, 30 foot honk if Scientology is a cult sign. And it takes a little bit of time to set that thing up. So I'm heading downtown right now to get that thing set up so that we can start the protest at 4 p.m. And I might be keeping a couple people waiting there who are there to help me set up the sign. So that's it for me for now. But stay tuned, guys. In 30 minutes, we'll be live downtown for our protest. So I'll see you guys there. Bye-bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,